The chilling echo of their laughter still reverberates in the deepest chambers of my memory, a symphony of condescension that, for a heart-stopping moment, nearly drowned out the silent scream of my own desperate premonition, nearly let fate snatch away the precious light of a little girl's innocence. But Sophia, yes, Sophia, had seen it, felt it, known it, with a certainty that transcended logic and reason, a knowing born of a life lived close to the ground, where the subtle shifts in the wind, the unspoken anxieties hidden in a fleeting glance, and the whisper of shadows held more truth than all the grand pronouncements of the world's most educated minds, and that knowing, that unyielding, unshakable intuition, became the anchor in a storm that threatened to engulf everything, becoming, in the end, the very thing that saved their daughter, a story etched not just in the annals of a wealthy family's history, but deeply, irrevocably, into the very soul of Sophia herself, a testament to resilience, to unseen strength, and to a love that dared to challenge the most formidable barriers of class and privilege. It was a crisp autumn evening, leaves painting the sprawling estate of the Albright family in hues of amber and rust, the kind of evening where the air itself seemed to hum with the quiet satisfaction of wealth and privilege, a world away from the dusty streets and cramped quarters Sophia called home for most of her life before her humble room in the staff wing became her sanctuary, a sanctuary from the often patronizing politeness that barely veiled the chasm of their different stations, politeness that, over the years, had worn thin the edges of Sophia's patience but never broken her spirit, and as the grand oak doors of the master's study closed with a soft thud behind her, Sophia could still feel the sting of Mrs. Eleanor Albright's dismissive smile, the dismissive wave of Mr. Richard Albright's hand, both so perfectly synchronized, so effortlessly superior, as if Sophia's words were nothing more than the idle ramblings of a senile old woman, or perhaps worse, the exaggerated fears of someone incapable of understanding the sophisticated security systems that guarded their opulent mansion, a mansion that to Sophia, with her innate connection to the natural world and its unseen dangers, felt as fragile as a house of cards against a truly determined wind. Sophia had been with the Albright family for almost 15 years, starting when Ilara, their only child, was but a tiny bundle swaddled in silk, a baby whose innocent gaze had instantly captured Sophia's heart, forming a bond that transcended employer and employee, a bond of pure, unconditional love that Sophia cherished more than life itself, for Ilara had no mother's warmth from Eleanor, who was always preoccupied with social engagements and philanthropic committees, her days a blur of charity galas, committee meetings, and endless rounds of golf, a woman whose touch was often more concerned with the perfection of a dress than the comfort of a child, nor a father's comforting presence from Richard, who was perpetually engrossed in his financial empires, his gruff voice more accustomed to barking orders than murmuring endearments, his attention always fixed on the stock market tickers and corporate reports that cluttered his study, leaving Ilara, even in the midst of immense wealth, strangely alone, adrift in a sea of nannies and tutors who came and went like the changing seasons. But Sophia, yes, Sophia's hands, Sophia's lullabies, Sophia's stories, Sophia's comforting presence, her steady, loving gaze, her patient explanations of the world's wonders, it was Sophia who filled that void, who nurtured Ilara's spirit, who taught her to tie her shoelaces, who bandaged her scraped knees, who dried her tears, who read to her for hours in the golden light of the afternoon sun, her love a constant, unwavering beacon in Ilara's young life, becoming the closest thing Ilara had to a true parent, a steadfast affection that was as deep and boundless as the ocean. And it was this profound love, this almost maternal instinct, that sharpened Sophia's senses, allowing her to perceive the faint dissonances in the otherwise perfect symphony of their lives, the subtle tremors that signaled an approaching earthquake long before anyone else even felt the ground shift beneath their feet, for Sophia knew Ilara's every breath, her every unspoken fear, her every small delight, and that intimacy bred an unparalleled intuition, a silent communication between their two hearts. The Albrights lived in a world of manicured lawns, high walls, and sophisticated technology, a world they believed impenetrable, a fortress against the ordinary anxieties of life, a gilded cage that they mistakenly thought shielded them from every ill, and Sophia, in her quiet, unassuming way, was often seen as a relic from a simpler time, a quaint fixture in their modern lives. Her observations often dismissed as old-fashioned superstitions were the musings of a mind prone to worry, a mind unburdened by the complexities of modern wealth management or high society etiquette. But Sophia, who had seen enough of the world to know that danger rarely announced itself with trumpets and fanfare, that evil often crept in on silent feet, continued to watch, to listen, to feel the subtle prickle of unease that had been growing within her for weeks now, a creeping shadow that no amount of logic could dispel. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, with things that could be easily explained away by anyone less attuned to the rhythms of the estate, or anyone less invested in its most precious inhabitant, like the way the gate to the servants' entrance, which Sophia always latched securely with a practiced double-check, would sometimes be found slightly ajar in the mornings, not flung open, but just enough to indicate it had been tampered with, a silent invitation, or the peculiar, acrid scent of cheap tobacco that would occasionally waft through the night air, even though neither Richard nor any of the staff smoked, a smell that Sophia once smelled lingering near the fragrant rose bushes just beyond Ilara's ground floor playroom window, a detail she tucked away in the deep recesses of her mind, a memory filed under unexplained anomalies, growing like a dark seed in her subconscious. Then there was the new gardener, a man with shifty eyes that never quite met hers, hands that seemed too clean, too unblemished for someone who spent his days tilling soil and pruning hedges, who Sophia had noticed watching the house with an unsettling intensity, his gaze lingering on the second-story windows where Ilara's room was located, a man who, despite his apparent diligence, seemed to spend an inordinate amount of time simply observing, his presence radiating an uncomfortable energy, a man who had disappeared as quickly as he arrived after just a few days, leaving no trace but a vague sense of disquiet in Sophia's heart, a feeling that something was profoundly, unnervingly, wrong. The unease deepened when Sophia began to notice faint, almost imperceptible scuff marks on the pristine white paint of the greenhouse windowsills, not dirt from muddy boots, but thin, linear abrasions, as if something, or someone, had been repeatedly resting or leaning against them, marks that appeared even after she diligently cleaned them, a silent declaration of a recurring presence, and these marks were often accompanied by small, crushed fragments of an unfamiliar, deep red leaf, unlike anything grown on the Albright property, suggesting a foreign element, a silent invader. One evening, as Sophia was preparing Ilara's chamomile tea, a ritual of comfort that Ilara cherished, Sophia heard a faint, almost imperceptible scratching sound coming from just outside the conservatory window, not the gentle rustle of leaves, nor the familiar chirping of crickets, but something deliberate, something metallic, like a key trying to find a lock or a tool carefully testing a seal, and when Sophia peered out, her heart quickening, she saw nothing, only the swaying shadows of the old oak tree, but the sound, it had been there, clear as day, a warning bell tolling in her soul, prompting Sophia to check all the windows and doors in Ilara's wing herself, even though the security system was supposed to handle it, a system that, in Sophia's estimation, could be outsmarted by a determined spider, or worse, by a cunning fox. Ilara, sensing Sophia's unusual tension, her subtle stiffening, had wrapped her small arms around Sophia's waist, her innocent eyes mirroring Sophia's concern, asking, "What's wrong, Sophia? Are you sad? Is something broken?" And Sophia, ever the protector, ever the shield against the world's harshness, had simply hugged her tighter, smoothing Ilara's soft, blonde hair, murmuring, "Nothing, sweet pea, just a little draft, that's all, a little gust of wind," while inside, a cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach, a premonition that was growing with an unsettling speed. The signs grew more frequent, more insistent, no longer subtle whispers but urgent shouts in Sophia's mind, like the strange, dark, nondescript van, its windows heavily tinted, that began to park on the quiet cul-de-sac a few times a week, its occupants seemingly just passing time, reading newspapers, or staring blankly ahead, but Sophia noticed the way it lingered just a little too long, the way its presence always seemed to coincide with Ilara's afternoon playdates in the garden, or her occasional forays into the front yard with her scooter, a consistent, unnerving pattern that set Sophia's teeth on edge, and her suspicions solidified into a terrifying certainty one Tuesday afternoon when she found one of Ilara's favorite stuffed animals, a worn teddy bear named Barnaby, a bear Ilara rarely let out of her sight, lying just outside the back gate, a gate that was always locked, a gate that Barnaby had no business being near, a gate that would have required him to somehow float over the high wall, and the way it was placed, almost deliberately, not lost, but left, as if sending a chilling message, a silent, macabre calling card, sent a shiver down Sophia's spine, a message that only she seemed to be able to decipher, one that screamed danger, screaming specifically that Ilara was being watched, that she was the target, that the time was drawing near, and it was at this moment, the moment Barnaby lay discarded on the dew-kissed grass, a poignant symbol of threatened innocence, that Sophia knew she could no longer remain silent, that the burden of this knowledge was too great to bear alone. Summoning all her courage, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, Sophia requested a private meeting with Mr. and Mrs. Albright, a rare occurrence that usually only happened for matters of staff grievances or household budgets, or perhaps a minor disciplinary issue, but this was different, this was a matter of life and death, as Sophia believed with every fiber of her being, a belief born of undeniable evidence and a mother's fierce instinct. She stood before them in their opulent study, the walls lined with leather-bound books and priceless art, bathed in the warm, golden glow of a roaring fire, the air thick with the scent of old money and expensive cigars, and Sophia, despite the tremor in her voice, despite the subtle condescension she felt emanating from them, laid out her observations, her fears, her almost prophetic certainty, her words precise, her gaze unwavering. She spoke of the gate, the tobacco smell near Ilara's window, the shifty-eyed gardener, the strange van, the inexplicable scuff marks, the crushed red leaves, the metallic scratching sound, and finally, with a catch in her throat, she spoke of Barnaby, connecting the dots that, to her, formed an undeniable pattern of threat, a clear and present danger to their daughter, to Ilara, a pattern that screamed of surveillance and sinister intent. Sophia looked from Eleanor's perfectly coiffed blonde hair, her face a mask of polite boredom, to Richard's stern, unyielding gaze, his fingers drumming impatiently on the arm of his chair, hoping, praying, that they would see what she saw, that they would feel the cold tendrils of fear that had been gripping her heart, that they would recognize the storm gathering on their horizon, but instead, a slow, amused smile spread across Eleanor's face, a smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes but never quite reached them, a smile that made Sophia's blood run cold, a smile that said, how quaint, how provincial, how utterly ridiculous. Sophia, dear, Eleanor began, her voice dripping with an almost saccharine sweetness that Sophia found far more chilling than outright anger, a tone usually reserved for dismissing an incompetent decorator. We appreciate your vigilance, truly we do. Your loyalty to Ilara is admirable, of course. But you've been with us for a long time, and sometimes, well, sometimes one's imagination can run a little wild, can't it? The mind plays tricks. This estate is practically a fortress, Sophia. We have state-of-the-art security systems, motion sensors, infrared cameras covering every inch of the perimeter, even a dedicated panic room accessible at the touch of a button. No one, absolutely no one, could possibly get in without setting off alarms that would alert half the county, let alone our private security firm. It's simply not plausible. Richard, leaning back in his expensive leather chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips, interjected with a booming laugh that seemed to echo Sophia's deepest fears, a laugh of pure, unadulterated dismissal, a sound that grated on Sophia's nerves. Indeed, Sophia, I pay a fortune for that system, the absolute best money can buy. Our security expert assured me it's virtually impenetrable. And as for your observations, the gate was probably left open by one of the landscapers. They're often careless, you know how it is. The smell of tobacco? Perhaps a neighbor, the wind carries things. The van? Delivery drivers are always around, or perhaps construction workers on a nearby property. Barnaby? Ilara probably dropped it on her way in from playing in the garden. Children are so absent-minded. The scuff marks? Wear and tear. The scratching? A branch against the window. You're simply overthinking things, old friend, reading too much into everyday occurrences. You worry too much, far too much. Relax, Sophia, everything is perfectly safe here. And then came the laughter, not a malicious laugh, but one born of utter disbelief, of a comfortable ignorance that had never known true fear, a patronizing chuckle that was joined by Eleanor, her delicate hand rising to cover her mouth in a gesture of refined amusement, a shared moment of casual derision at Sophia's expense, a testament to their unwavering faith in their own impenetrable bubble, a bubble of wealth, privilege, and perceived security, a bubble that Sophia could see was about to burst, for in their laughter, in their casual dismissal, in their complete inability to see beyond their own self-assured world, Sophia heard the cruel cackle of fate itself, challenging her, daring her, to prove them wrong, to protect Ilara when no one else would listen, when those who should have protected her were willfully deaf and blind. Sophia's heart sank, a heavy stone plunging into the depths of her despair, a despair tinged with a familiar weariness, for this was not the first time her wisdom, her experience, her intuition had been disregarded by those who deemed themselves her intellectual superiors, but even amidst the crushing weight of their disbelief, a spark of fierce determination ignited within her, a resolve hardened by years of being underestimated, of being unheard, of being invisible, of her skin color and social standing dictating the validity of her words, and she knew, with an unyielding certainty, that she alone bore the sacred duty of protecting Ilara, for if her warnings were scoffed at, then her actions would speak, louder than any alarm, more effectively than any security system, more powerfully than any spoken word. From that moment on, Sophia became a silent sentinel, her eyes sharper, her ears more attuned, her every movement imbued with a quiet, purposeful vigilance, a grace born of a desperate mission, and she began to implement her own, clandestine security measures, small, seemingly insignificant acts that, in Sophia's mind, were building a new, invisible fortress around Ilara, a fortress constructed not of steel and cameras, but of love, of foresight, of strategic ingenuity, for she knew that the danger was real, that it was close, and that it was growing, closing in on their unwitting target with a chilling precision. She started by teaching Ilara a new game, a game of hide-and-seek that wasn't quite a game, subtly instructing her on the safest places to hide in the house, places known only to them, secret nooks and crannies that even the Albrights themselves, with their casual knowledge of their own sprawling home, were entirely unaware of, like the small and used storage closet behind the old linen press on the second floor, its existence long forgotten by the family, or the hidden alcove beneath the grand staircase, a narrow, dark space concealed behind a loose panel that Sophia had discovered decades ago, spaces that Ilara, with her childlike delight in secrets and mysteries, embraced with gusto, never realizing the true, dire purpose behind Sophia's innocent lessons, simply enjoying the thrill of a shared secret with her beloved Sophia. Sophia also began to subtly alter Ilara's routine, suggesting a walk in a different part of the garden, a path less visible from the street, proposing an afternoon of reading indoors instead of playing outside, or a quiet tea party in the drawing room rather than a boisterous run around the grounds, always offering a plausible, innocent-sounding reason that would not raise suspicion from the Albrights, always with a cheerful, unassuming demeanor, but always with the underlying motive of disrupting any potential patterns the unseen watchers might have observed, creating a subtle unpredictability that she hoped would throw them off, making their sinister task just a little bit harder, buying Ilara precious time, and Sophia's heart a tiny measure of peace. She started leaving a small, flickering nightlight in Ilara's room, ostensibly for Ilara's comfort, to ward off childhood fears of the dark, but in truth, it served a dual purpose, allowing Sophia to visually check on Ilara from the hallway without needing to open the door, a quick, reassuring glance through the crack in the doorframe as she passed by on her nightly rounds, ensuring that her precious charge was safe and sound in her bed, her small body rising and falling with the rhythm of peaceful sleep, for Sophia had an almost preternatural ability to wake at the slightest disturbance, a skill honed over decades of caring for others, of raising her own siblings, of nursing the sick in her community, and now, sharpened to a razor's edge by an ever-present, suffocating fear for Ilara. Sophia also purchased a small, shrill whistle, a simple, silver instrument, ostensibly for Ilara to use while playing in the garden, a fun toy to summon Sophia or the other staff if she needed something, but Sophia, in hushed tones, her voice low and serious, explained to Ilara that it was her special alarm, a secret signal to blow if she ever felt scared, if she saw someone she didn't recognize, if anything felt wrong, emphasizing its importance with a solemnity that Ilara, despite her youth, seemed to intuitively grasp, holding onto the silver whistle as if it were a precious talisman, a tiny beacon of hope in a world that Sophia knew was far more dangerous than anyone around them realized, and Sophia knew, she just knew, that one day, the tiny whistle might be the only sound that could pierce through the looming darkness, the only hope against a silent, insidious threat. The growing tension in the house was palpable to Sophia, a suffocating blanket of dread that no one else seemed to feel, a silent scream that only she could hear, for the Albrights continued their lives of lavish dinners and social events, their calendars overflowing with engagements, blissfully unaware of the predators circling their nest, their laughter still occasionally echoing in the vast halls, a painful reminder of their dismissal, a sharp contrast to Sophia's quiet, unrelenting terror. Her nights often spent pacing, her days a blur of anxious watchfulness, her heart heavy with the unspoken knowledge that time was running out, that the trap was closing. She noticed the new scratches on the back garden wall, just above the height a man could easily reach, marks too fresh to be old, too deliberate to be accidental, and the peculiar way the branches of the ancient wisteria vine, which Sophia meticulously trimmed, now seemed to be purposefully bent and intertwined, creating a makeshift ladder leading up towards the conservatory windows, a chilling sign of reconnaissance and preparation, and Sophia, her stomach clenching with fear, discreetly placed thorny rose trimmings beneath the vine, a small, desperate deterrent, a silent prayer. The final, undeniable clue came in the form of a forgotten cigarette butt, discovered by Sophia under a rose bush directly beneath Ilara's window, not the cheap tobacco she had smelled before, but a much more expensive, distinctive brand that Mr. Albright occasionally smoked, suggesting that an intruder, confident and perhaps even arrogant, had felt bold enough to leave a trace, a taunt, right under their noses, right under the very window of their intended victim, and Sophia knew then, with awe, Horrifying certainty that brought tears to her eyes, that the strike was imminent, that the time for observation was over, that the time for action had arrived, that she had to act, and act fast. The night it happened was an unusually stormy one, the sky bruised purple and black, rent by jagged streaks of lightning that illuminated the sprawling estate in stark, fleeting flashes, followed by the deep, resonant rumble of thunder that shook the very foundations of the old house, rattling the windows, an angry symphony that seemed to mirror the turmoil in Sophia's own soul, and Sophia, her sleep already light with anxiety, her senses heightened by weeks of relentless vigilance, was instantly awake, a cold dread seizing her heart, for the power had flickered out, plunging the entire mansion into an eerie, suffocating darkness, a darkness that felt different, heavier, more sinister than any ordinary blackout, a darkness that was pregnant with malicious intent, and Sophia's every instinct screamed danger, not just the usual storm-induced fear, but something far more primal, far more terrifying. She heard it then, a faint, almost inaudible scrape against glass, followed by a soft, muffled thud from the direction of the conservatory, a sound that bypassed the Albrights' vaunted security system, for the storm had conveniently disabled the power, rendering their technological fortress utterly vulnerable, a fortress now reduced to a dark, silent mausoleum, and Sophia, her bare feet silent on the cold marble floor, moved with a speed and stealth born of pure adrenaline, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her ears, her mind racing, immediately connecting the dots to all the previous warnings, to the tobacco smell, to the suspicious van, to Barnaby, to the scuff marks and the bent wisteria, and now, to the chilling silence that had descended upon the house after the thunder, a silence broken only by the incessant drumming of the rain and the increasingly loud thuds coming from the conservatory. As Sophia approached the conservatory, guided by the intermittent flashes of lightning, her breath held tight in her chest, she saw it, a dark, hulking figure silhouetted against the infrequent flashes of lightning, clearly inside the house, moving with a predatory grace, his form unnaturally large, too large to be an ordinary burglar, and then, another, equally menacing shadow, slipping through the now shattered glass pane, followed by a third, a team of intruders, their movements practiced, professional, chillingly efficient, and Sophia knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that they were not after the family jewels, not after the priceless art, not after the silver or the cash, for their movements were too deliberate, too focused, too directed towards the upper floors, towards Ilara's room, and Sophia, without a moment's hesitation, without a flicker of fear for her own safety, knew she had to intercept them, she had to be the wall between them and her precious child, her small, frail body a shield against the encroaching darkness. Instead of rushing headlong into a confrontation she couldn't win against three armed men, Sophia remembered Ilara's game, her heart twisting with a fierce resolve, her mind instantly recalling the secret hiding places she had so carefully, so subtly taught Ilara, and she immediately veered towards the hidden alcove beneath the grand staircase, one of the secret spots, a place that was often overlooked, known only to them, knowing that if Ilara was not in her bed, she would be there, waiting. Safe, hopefully, having followed Sophia's earlier instructions, and sure enough, as Sophia rounded the corner, her eyes accustomed to the gloom, she saw a faint glimmer of light, a small, silver reflection, and then, a tiny, muffled whimper, her precious Ilara, huddled in the darkness, clutching her silver whistle, her face streaked with tears, her small body trembling with fright, but safe, for now, a profound wave of relief washing over Sophia even as the danger pressed in. Sophia scooped Ilara into her arms, whispering urgent, comforting words, her hands flying to cover Ilara's mouth to muffle any further sound, pressing her close, feeling Ilara's rapidly beating heart against her own, and then, she heard them, heavy footsteps thudding up the grand staircase, the menacing whispers of men searching, their voices gruff and impatient, drawing closer and closer, their target clearly Ilara's room, and Sophia knew she could not stay there, that the alcove would eventually be discovered, that they would sweep the house systematically, and the small space would offer only temporary respite, so she made a daring decision, a desperate gamble for time, a risk that twisted her stomach into knots but was her only hope. With Ilara held tight against her chest, her small form barely a feather in Sophia's arms despite her own trembling, Sophia slipped out of the alcove and, using the utter darkness as her cloak, moved towards the staff stairwell, a narrow, winding set of stairs usually reserved for the domestic help, a path less likely to be immediately checked by the intruders, who would assume the family's wealth was upstairs, not among the humble staff quarters, and as they reached the second-floor landing, Sophia heard the distinct thud of a door being kicked open, followed by a frustrated curse, the sound coming from Ilara's room, and Sophia knew they had found the empty bed, knew they were realizing their target was gone, that their carefully planned abduction was already going awry, their anger a palpable force even through the thick walls. Panic threatened to overwhelm Sophia, a cold wave that threatened to paralyze her, but her mind, clear and sharp even in the face of such terrifying danger, focused solely on Ilara's safety, her primal instinct overriding all fear, and she remembered the back stairwell, leading to the pantry, a long, winding descent, but one that had a small, rarely used service entrance that led out to a secluded part of the garden, a path that Sophia, in her meticulous care of the grounds, knew intimately, a path that would be hidden from the main house, a route of escape. As they moved silently down the staff stairs, Sophia could hear the rising anger in the intruders' voices, their frantic search now spreading through the upper floors, their frustration palpable, their curses echoing through the dark house, and Ilara, sensing Sophia's urgency, her every muscle tense, remained utterly silent, her small body trembling against Sophia's, but her eyes, wide with fear, fixed on Sophia's face, a silent testament to her trust, to the deep, unshakable bond they shared. A bond that was their only anchor in this terrifying storm. Suddenly, a powerful beam of light cut through the darkness from above, sweeping down the stairwell, momentarily blinding Sophia, and her heart leaped into her throat, a cold spike of terror, and she instinctively pulled Ilara back into a recess in the wall, a deep shadow carved into the stone, pressing herself flat against the cold stone, holding her breath, listening to the heavy footsteps descend, closer, closer, the beam sweeping past them, inches from their hidden forms, and then, past them, the light disappearing, the footsteps fading as the intruder continued his search downwards, convinced no one was there, his heavy boots thudding away into the lower regions of the house, and Sophia, seizing the fleeting moment of opportunity, pushed forward, her only goal the discreet service entrance, the promise of the outside world, of escape. They finally reached the bottom, the air cooler, fresher, as they approached the small, wooden door, a simple, unadorned portal that now represented their only hope, and Sophia, with a swift, decisive movement, her fingers fumbling only for a second in the darkness, unlatched it, pushing it open just enough to slip through, pulling Ilara behind her, into the stormy night, the rain now falling in a cold, steady deluge, masking their escape, soaking them instantly, but also muffling their footsteps, providing a much-needed veil, and Sophia, her lungs burning, her muscles screaming, ran faster than she had ever run in her life, clutching Ilara fiercely, her eyes scanning the dark, rain-soaked garden for any sign of safety, any place of refuge, her only thought to get Ilara away from the house, away from the danger, away from the grasp of those who sought to steal her, away from the terrifying sounds of the search party inside the mansion. She headed instinctively towards the old groundskeeper's shed, a sturdy, forgotten structure at the furthest edge of the estate, nestled amongst overgrown bushes and ancient trees, knowing it would be locked, but hoping the thick, weathered walls and remote location would offer a temporary reprieve, a place to hide, a place to think, until help, somehow, could arrive, until the nightmare could end, and as they reached the shed, Sophia, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, fueled by sheer desperation and love, managed to pry open a small, rusted window, pushing Ilara through, then scrambling in after her, her old bones aching, the small space surprisingly dry and filled with the comforting, earthy scent of old tools and damp soil, a haven in the raging storm. Huddled together in the darkness of the shed, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the tin roof, a primal, ancient sound that both soothed and intensified the terror, Sophia pressed Ilara's head against her chest, her hand stroking Ilara's wet hair, whispering prayers, whispering assurances, telling her everything would be all right, her voice trembling but firm, even as her own heart hammered with unadulterated terror, even as she strained her ears for any sound of pursuit, and Ilara, in a voice barely above a whisper, choked out, her small hand clutching the silver whistle, "Sophia, I blew the whistle, like you told me. I blew it so hard, Sophia." Sophia froze, her breath catching in her throat, her mind replaying Ilara's words, realizing that amidst the chaos of the storm, the struggle, the escape, she hadn't heard it, the tiny sound lost in the thunder and the rain, but Ilara, her innocent trust unwavering, her small fingers having clung to that tiny beacon of hope, had remembered Sophia's instruction, had followed Sophia's warning, and Sophia's heart swelled with a mixture of pride and renewed fear, for the whistle, if heard, could be their salvation, or their undoing, for it could have drawn the intruders directly to them. Just then, a faint, distant wail pierced the night, growing steadily louder, cutting through the drumming rain and the rumbling thunder, the unmistakable sound of sirens, and Sophia's breath hitched, a wave of profound relief washing over her, so potent it almost brought her to her knees, a relief that brought hot, cleansing tears to her eyes, for Ilara's whistle, small as it was, had been heard, had cut through the storm, had reached someone, had summoned help, just as Sophia had envisioned. Just as she had prepared for, just as she had hoped in her darkest moments, her simple, instinctive wisdom once again proving more potent than any technological marvel. Moments later, the estate grounds were swarming with flashing blue and red lights, illuminating the rain-swept landscape in a surreal, urgent tableau, the chaos of the police and emergency services a stark contrast to the earlier, terrifying silence, the air now filled with the shouts of officers, the crackle of radios, the hurried footsteps of first responders, and Sophia, emerging from the shed, her clothes soaked, her body shivering, with Ilara still clinging to her, her small face buried in Sophia's shoulder, was met by a barrage of frantic questions, by the stunned, tear-streaked faces of Richard and Eleanor, who had finally been alerted by the wailing sirens, their expressions a mixture of confusion, shock, and dawning horror as they processed the true gravity of the situation, as they saw Ilara, safe but shivering, in Sophia's arms, her small body testament to the terrifying ordeal, and then, as they were told of the forced entry, the ransacked rooms, the broken windows, the clear intent to abduct their daughter, their only child, their most precious possession, a realization that hit them with the force of a physical blow. It was in that moment, under the harsh glare of the police floodlights, surrounded by the flashing chaos, the rain washing over their faces like a cold baptism, that the Albrights finally understood, their eyes locking onto Sophia's, their previous amusement, their patronizing laughter, replaced by a raw, naked horror, by an overwhelming wave of guilt and shame that washed over them, stripping away their pretense of superiority, their carefully constructed facade of invulnerability, leaving them utterly exposed, utterly vulnerable, utterly human. Richard, his face pale and drawn, stumbled towards Sophia, his expensive suit soaked and mud-splattered, his voice choked with emotion, thick with unshed tears. "Sophia, my God, Sophia, you were right. All along, you were right. Every single detail. We didn't listen. We dismissed you. We laughed at you. How could we have been so blind, so stupid?" And Eleanor, her carefully constructed composure shattered, her perfectly styled hair now plastered to her forehead, her eyes red-rimmed and streaming with tears that mingled with the rainwater, fell to her knees before Sophia, heedless of the mud, grasping Sophia's hands, her touch desperate, sincere, her voice a broken whisper, a plea for forgiveness. "Forgive us, Sophia. Please, forgive us. We were so arrogant, so foolish. You saved her. You saved our daughter. Our precious Ilara. You saved her life, Sophia. You saved everything." Sophia, her own body trembling from the ordeal, exhausted both physically and emotionally, could only look at them, at their raw, unadulterated grief and their profound, belated understanding, and in their tear-filled eyes, Sophia saw not just remorse, but a genuine, earth-shattering realization of their profound error, of their arrogant dismissal, of the dangerous chasm they had allowed to exist between them and the woman who loved their child as her own, a chasm that had almost cost them everything. And in that moment, all the years of quiet indignation, of feeling unheard, of being undervalued, of being invisible despite her monumental contributions, melted away, replaced by a singular, overwhelming emotion, relief, pure, unadulterated relief, that Ilara was safe, that her love, her intuition, her unwavering vigilance, had prevailed, that her warnings, though belatedly, had found their mark, a deep, abiding peace settling over her tired soul. The police investigation that followed, swift and thorough, unearthed a sophisticated ring of child traffickers who had indeed been casing the Albright estate for weeks, months even, drawn by its isolated grandeur, its perceived security, and the Albrights' well-known, ostentatious wealth, a perfect target for a lucrative abduction, and Ilara, chosen for her perceived vulnerability and the potential for a substantial ransom, had been their prime target, confirming every single one of Sophia's seemingly paranoid observations, validating her warnings with a horrifying clarity that left the Albrights utterly devastated and eternally grateful, the pieces fitting together with a terrifying precision that underscored Sophia's foresight. The shifty-eyed gardener, who was an inside man, providing reconnaissance, the mysterious van, used for surveillance and transport, the dropped teddy bear, a chilling signal that their target was identified and tracked, the scuff marks and bent wisteria, preparations for entry, the cheap tobacco, a careless habit of one of the lookouts, all were pieces of a meticulously planned abduction, thwarted only by Sophia's unyielding belief in her own intuition and her selfless, courageous actions, her quiet, often unseen efforts, her deep, unwavering love, proving to be the most formidable barrier of all. In the weeks and months that followed, the Albright mansion, once a symbol of their untouchable privilege, of their comfortable isolation from the world's harsher realities, became a testament to Sophia's extraordinary courage and wisdom, forever changed, the superficial sheen of their lives irrevocably tarnished, but in its place, something far more profound began to grow, for the silence that had once filled its halls, the unspoken tensions, the casual disregard, was replaced by a new kind of respect, a new kind of humility, a new kind of love, a genuine warmth that had been absent for so long, for the Albrights were profoundly, irrevocably altered by the terrifying ordeal. Their laughter, once so dismissive, so self-assured, was now replaced by quiet reflection, by a genuine thoughtfulness, their arrogance by a profound humility, a sobering recognition of their own fallibility, and their previously superficial relationship with Sophia transformed into one of deep, abiding respect and gratitude, a bond that transcended their stations, for Sophia was no longer just the maid, she was family, she was the guardian angel, she was the quiet hero who had saved their most precious treasure, their Ilara, the keeper of their daughter's very life. Eleanor, shedding her socialite facade, her endless pursuit of social standing now seeming utterly meaningless, spent more time at home, truly connecting with Ilara, cherishing every moment, her touch now gentle and loving, her attention undivided, realizing that true wealth lay not in possessions but in the precious, fragile bonds of family, and Richard, his financial empire now seeming insignificant in comparison to the fragile beauty of life, dedicated himself not just to improving security, investing in community safety programs, but more importantly, to listening, truly listening, to those he had once dismissed, his gruff demeanor softening, his understanding of the world broadened by a profound and painful lesson. And Ilara, though forever marked by the trauma, emerged with an even deeper, more profound bond with Sophia, her trust in Sophia absolute, unwavering, a sacred promise kept, a life saved by the wisdom of a woman they had laughed at, a woman whose heart proved to be the strongest shield. Sophia, in her quiet dignity, continued her duties, but now with a lightness in her heart, a peace that came from knowing she had been heard, that she had made a difference, that her love had been the most powerful security system of all, a silent, unwavering force against the darkness, and her presence in the Albright home, once a quiet shadow, now radiated with an undeniable, luminous light, a constant reminder of the day when they laughed at the maid's warning, but her words, and her courageous heart, saved their daughter, forever weaving Sophia's spirit into the very fabric of their family, a testament to the enduring power of empathy, intuition, and unconditional love. This was today's story on Star Tales. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful tales that touch the heart.